Bacon was among the great artists of the 20th century, and also one of the most enigmatic. Commentators attempting to explain his paintings tend to admit defeat and call them a mystery. We're publishing a previously unseen archive of images that record the changes he made to 80 of his paintings. They were paintings that had been collected by his gallery as completed, but which Bacon reconsidered and had returned to him. If many of the questions raised by Bacon's paintings may never be answered, the images in revisions provide new and fascinating insights into his thinking and work processes. In Bacon's paintings of the human body, we recognise the passion, fluidity and vitality of the brushstrokes he applied to express his ideas. Yet the formulation of his unsettling visions was a complicated matter, which we continue to seek to understand. Here then are some clues. Bacon always worked alone in his studio. He never allowed himself to be photographed in the act of painting, except on this one occasion. This was the only large triptych he painted of John Edwards, his partner from 1976 until Bacon's death in 1992. The two men viewed the triptych after it had been delivered to Marlborough Fine Art in 1984. There, Bacon added the oval to the centre panel, perhaps as a kind of signing off or as a testimony to his muse. It can't have been an entirely impromptu gesture, for evidently Bacon had taken a brush and paint with him. The alteration Bacon made to the centre panel of this large triptych was more fundamental. The first version of the triptych was painted in 1974, and it was exhibited in this form in 3 museum exhibitions. But the strange, distorted figure in the foreground peering out at us through binoculars mystified and unnerved many viewers. Several of Bacon's confidants conveyed their dissatisfaction with it, and, most unusually, Bacon eventually concurred. In 1977, he carefully painted out the figure and felt its removal was a great improvement. Bacon's famously disorganised studio was photographed shortly after he died in 1992. Amid the clutter, he had pinned to a wall reproductions of 2 paintings, one of which is Triptych 1974 to 77. If you look closely, you will see that it is the first version of the painting, the one he had revised 15 years earlier. We can only speculate on what his retention of this obliterated image signified. It's another Bacon enigma. A claim used to circulate that Bacon simplified his later works out of laziness or a loss of energy. This is patently untrue on both counts. In fact, by striving to make his compositions simpler, he created considerable extra work for himself. In this instance, he must have assessed the painting and reasoned that several elements in it were superfluous. Painstakingly, he proceeded to paint out the bare light bulb, the circle, and all the background geometry. By these efforts, he achieved his stated aim: to pare down the image to its essence. Bacon made revisions to his paintings throughout his career, but from the period before colour photography became the norm in the 1970s, few documents exist on which to base accurate comparisons. Nevertheless, this old black and white print indicates clearly the changes he made to the left panel. One was possibly for formal reasons. It is impossible to tell what the colour of the background panels or screens was, but we can see it was pale, perhaps white. The switch to black imposes a more ominous atmosphere onto the room. The other alteration was possibly made for personal reasons. Few artists, apart from Bacon, would have described a crucifixion as nearer a self-portrait. But who are these 2 ambiguous figures? The scene has been interpreted as autobiographical, that it shows Bacon's father ejecting him from the family home in Ireland when he was 16. While this seems implausible, if seductive, it may have referred to Francis's melodramatic reimagining of an actual event, his kicking daddy. That Bacon modified the identity of the man to the left, removing his glasses and changing the angle of the head, is a sign of how much he had invested in the painting. He intended this huge, asymmetrical 3 studies for a crucifixion as the pièce de résistance in his first major retrospective, which opened at the Tate Gallery in July 1962. It made the impact Bacon desired, opening a new chapter in his art and helping to seal his fame.
Our project of uniting and comparing archival photographs of the first versions of Francis Bacon's paintings and their corresponding finished canvases has been an illuminating one. It afforded us the opportunity to witness the moment of creation for a great number of Bacon's paintings, including some of his finest ones. Comparison of these images revealed Bacon's powers not only as a painter, but also as an editor of his oeuvre. What strikes me most, now that the book is laid out, and we have color-corrected our image files of the early versions, which were scanned from these, sometimes badly degraded archival transparencies, is how useful this book promises to be for anyone who wants to understand how Bacon's paintings worked. They demonstrate the levels of color, contrast, density of imagery, and symmetry that Bacon considered a finished painting must possess. It is as close, looking back at paintings completed in the last century, as we shall ever get to watching Francis Bacon paint.